It's just after noon. February 25th, 2005. A compliance officer in Park City, Kansas is driving home for lunch. He does this every day. Same route, same time. He's thinking about what's in the refrigerator, maybe. Or about the church council meeting on Thursday. Or about nothing in particular. He turns onto his street. There are police cars, a lot of them. An officer walks toward the car, knocks on the window. "Mr. Rader, do you know why you're going downtown?" The man thinks for a moment. "Oh, I have suspicions why." He had been the president of his church council, a Boy Scout leader, a family man, a compliance officer who measured people's lawns with a tape measure and cited them for trash cans left out too late. He was also something else. He had always been both. The white hat. How does a person become two things at once and never feel the weight of either one? You're watching this at home, maybe on a sofa, maybe late at night, the room half dark, the screen the only light. And somewhere in your city, right now, tonight, there is someone who installs alarms for frightened people, who attends a church council meeting on Thursday, who measures lawns with a tape measure. You don't know his name, but you've probably nodded at him. Dennis Lynn Rader was born March 9th, 1945, in Pittsburgh, Kansas, oldest of 4 sons. Father, U.S. Marine, later a utility worker. Mother, a bookkeeper. Both worked long hours. Both paid little attention to their children at home. Rader later said he felt ignored, particularly by his mother. He never forgot it. He grew up in the Lutheran Church, joined the Boy Scouts, married Paula Dietz in 1971 at Christ Lutheran Church, Wichita. 2 children, Kerry and Brian. From 1974 to 1988, he worked for ADT Security Services, installing home alarms across Wichita. Many of his clients were frightened homeowners. They were frightened because of BTK. They let Dennis Rader into their homes. Think about the last person who came into your home to fix something. An electrician, a plumber, someone from the cable company, someone who installed a camera, or a smoke alarm, or a security system. Do you remember his face? Do you remember his last name? Rader's clients didn't either. They just knew he was from ADT. He had a uniform. He had a badge. He seemed competent and quiet and polite. He left knowing exactly how their house worked. At ADT, co-workers called him the Blue Book Man. He followed every rule in the employee handbook. He scolded colleagues for making small talk during breaks. He needed perfect order, perfect compliance. In 1991, he became a compliance officer for Park City. He patrolled neighborhoods with a tape measure, cited people for grass a centimeter too long, for trash cans visible from the road. Neighbors found him petty, aggressive. Some found him frightening. Nobody suspected him of murder. By January 2005, 1 month before his arrest, Dennis Rader was elected president of his church council. He called this side of himself the white hat. He didn't experience it as a performance. He experienced it as true. The people who voted him as church council president, they were not fools. They were neighbours, parents, people who had watched him for years, at services, at community events, at barbecues in the summer. They voted for him because he seemed trustworthy, not because they were careless, because he was good at this. The fantasies started in grade school, not as something that arrived suddenly, as something that had always been there, growing quietly. By his own admission, Rader developed fantasies about domination and control while he was still in elementary school. By puberty, the fantasies involved women. By early adulthood, they had a name, a structure, and a logic of their own. He killed small animals, cats and dogs, hanged and strangled. He kept this hidden. No one knew. Domination confirmed in Rader's own correspondence with Ramsland, presented as his account, not independent fact. Forensic psychologist Dr. Catherine Ramsland, who corresponded with Rader for 6 years following his conviction, traced one specific moment as a possible origin point. According to Rader's own account, as a young boy he witnessed his mother's ring catch on a couch spring, leaving her briefly trapped and helpless. He described it as his first experience of sexual arousal. A woman, helpless, looking toward him. He called the part of himself that grew from that moment the Minotaur. The Minotaur is a creature from Greek mythology, half man, half bull, living in a labyrinth, hidden from the world, fed what it needed, never seen. Rader chose that name deliberately. He experienced the Minotaur as separate from himself. When he wrote about his crimes in his private journals, journals no one was ever supposed to read, he wrote about them in the third person. BTK did this. The Minotaur needed that. Not Dennis. Never Dennis. Now, the easy explanation is that this is a lie, that Rader invented the Minotaur after his arrest to escape responsibility. Criminologist James Allen Fox said exactly that. To use a technical term, it's poppycock. It was Dennis Rader making the decisions, not Factor X. But here is what makes this case harder than a simple lie. He didn't invent the Minotaur after his arrest. He had been writing about it for decades. In journals nobody was supposed to read. In notebooks hidden in walls and beneath floorboards. In his house. In his church office. In abandoned barns across Kansas. A man building a lie for an audience doesn't write it down alone in the dark for 30 years. Let's stop here for a moment. Because there are two completely different ways to read everything we've just covered, and they can't both be right. The first interpretation: Dennis Rader was a calculating psychopath who constructed a persona, the white hat, as camouflage. The Minotaur, Factor X, the journals, all of it is performance, manipulation, even from a prison cell. James Allen Fox is right. The second interpretation, the compartmentalization, was genuine. Dennis Rader experienced himself as two separate people, with no bridge between them and no cognitive dissonance. The Minotaur was not an excuse. It was a description. Catherine Ramsland is right. Both of these interpretations are held by serious forensic psychologists with access to the same evidence. And here's why that matters more than which one is correct. If Ramsland is right, then the Minotaur isn't a story about Dennis Rader. It's a story about the architecture of the human mind. Here is what this means in practice. It means that the compliance officer who irritated your neighbour, the one who always followed the rules a little too precisely, who seemed slightly off but never in any way you could name, could be genuinely two different people in the same body, not acting, not pretending, actually experiencing himself as the responsible, helpful man he shows you. The question isn't whether you would have recognized Dennis Rader. The question is, what would recognition have even looked like? Between 1974 and 1991, Dennis Rader murdered 10 people in Wichita and Park City, Kansas. Men, women, and children. He called them projects. He referred to their murders as hits. He described the act of killing as putting them down. During the same years, he attended church every Sunday. He led Cub Scout troops. He installed security alarms for frightened homeowners, many of whom were frightened because of him. He went home to Paula and the children. He attended community meetings. He fixed things around the house. He described the mechanism of this in correspondence with Dr. Ramsland. He called it cubing, the ability to mentally switch between faces of himself the way you'd turn a cube in your hand. White hat, black hat, family man, compliance officer, the Minotaur. Each face was fully present when it was forward. The others simply weren't there. It depends on what day you get him as to whether you'll hear him talk about remorse. No cognitive dissonance. No guilt that leaked between the faces. No moment where one identity confronted the other. But here is the detail that most accounts of BTK leave out. Some people saw something. Misty King was a single mother in Park City. After her divorce, Rader began appearing at her door with citation after citation. Grass too long, car untarped, woodpile in the wrong place. He came continuously. He monitored her. He escalated when another man moved in. Tina Lindsay, another neighbour, said she never trusted him. That one night, sitting alone at home, her dog began barking at something outside. She walked the perimeter. She didn't see anyone, but she felt someone watching her. Complaints were made to Rader's supervisors about his behaviour, from staff and from residents. They were largely ignored. He was later promoted to supervisor. Misty King filed the complaints. She did everything right. Her supervisors looked at Dennis Rader, the Blue Book man, the man who followed every rule, and they chose him over her. Think about the people in your own life who have filed complaints that went nowhere, who said something felt wrong, who put it on record, who were told it wasn't enough. Sometimes the system doesn't fail because no one saw. Sometimes it fails because the wrong person looked credible. His daughter Kerry later wrote a book about her childhood. She described a warm father, a family man. She struggled, after his arrest, to reconcile the man she knew with what he had done. In 2024, at a true crime convention, she presented excerpts from his prison journals. The journals suggested that the darkness had been present in the home as well. The white hat and the black hat were never in different rooms. They were always in the same house. After his final murder in January 1991, Dennis Rader went silent. 13 years. No letters, no packages, no taunting communications. The case went cold. Many investigators assumed BTK was dead, imprisoned for another crime, or had simply stopped. In January 2004, on the 30th anniversary of the Otero family murders, the Wichita Eagle published a retrospective piece. The headline read, "BTK Case Unsolved, 30 Years Later." The article speculated that the killer had been forgotten, was perhaps dead, or long gone. Rader later said he saw the story, and was, in his own words, kind of bored. So he decided to resurface. In March 2004, a letter arrived at the Wichita Eagle from someone calling himself Bill Thomas Killman. Inside, photographs of a murder from 1986, a photocopy of the victim's driver's license, missing since the day she died. BTK was back, after a quarter-century of silence. Not because something had changed, not because the compulsion returned, because a newspaper article had suggested he'd been forgotten. Dr. Ramsland described this as a narcissistic injury, the moment when Rader's ego could no longer tolerate invisibility. For 30 years, the Machiavellian side of him had held the narcissistic side in check, self-preservation outweighing the need to be seen. One article tipped the balance. The same need for control that made him a killer made him uncatchable. The same need for recognition made him caught. Over the next 11 months, Rader sent 10 communications to police and media. Letters, packages, dolls posed to mimic his victims, a word puzzle, an outline he titled, simply, The BTK Story. In January 2005, the same month he was elected church council president, he sent a cereal box to a police contact. Inside the box, among other materials, was a note with a question. Could you tell me if a floppy disk could be traced to a computer? Through a classified ad in the Wichita Eagle, law enforcement replied, Rex, it will be okay. It was a lie. 2 weeks later, a purple floppy disk arrived at a local Fox TV affiliate. Forensic investigators recovered deleted files from the disk. The metadata showed the disk had been used at a computer registered to Christ Lutheran Church by a user named Dennis. When confronted with the evidence, Rader expressed shock, genuine shock, that the police had lied to him. A man who had deceived an entire city for 30 years was outraged by a classified ad. Factor X did not catch Dennis Rader. Forensics did not catch Dennis Rader. The need to be seen caught Dennis Rader. The same architecture that made him invisible for 30 years, the cubing, the compartments, the absolute control, had one structural weakness. He needed someone to know. He sent the floppy disk from the computer at his church office, the same office where he led council meetings, where he shook hands with people after Sunday service, where he was trusted with the keys. The hands that killed 10 people typed that message 10 meters from where his congregation prayed. Same building, same man, same Tuesday morning. Misty King knew something. Tina Lindsay knew something. Her dog knew something. They did what you're supposed to do. They said something. They reported it. They put it on record. Nobody listened. Not because the people in charge were incompetent, not because they were malicious, but because Dennis Rader was a church council president, a compliance officer, a man who followed the blue book. He looked exactly like what trust is supposed to look like. And a woman's discomfort, a neighbour's unease, a dog barking at the wrong time, did not fit into the form you needed to fill out to make it official. BTK was not hidden by a mask. BTK was hidden by a system that rewards people who look like Dennis Rader. How many times have you overridden a feeling because the person on the other side had a title? Neither of them was lying. The compliance officer, the church president, the security installer. You've let people into your home because they had a badge and wore a uniform and smiled and said the right things. You've dismissed a feeling because it felt impolite. Because surely someone like that wouldn't. Because you didn't want to be the person who says something without evidence. Misty King had evidence. She said something. Nobody listened. What would you have done differently? And what makes you certain you would have done it at all? Dennis Rader is still in a Kansas prison. He writes letters. He draws. He corresponds with researchers. He is, by most accounts, a model inmate. The white hat is still on his head. The Minotaur is still in the labyrinth. And somewhere between the two of them, in the space where a person's identity should be, Dennis Rader still cannot tell you which one is real. Neither of them was lying. Sleep tight, dear listeners. If this kept you awake, subscribe.